What's up, everybody? My name is Joshi. I'm a real estate broker and I work in Toronto and area. I get a whole bunch of questions about Airbnb and how that relates with what I do in real estate. I have a lot of investors as well that want to invest in what they call Airbnb properties, even though there's no such thing. But Airbnb can be a lucrative way to, make some money. So I thought, let me do a quick video. Well, it's actually not that quick. I don't know if you know, but in the city of Toronto before January 2018, short-term rentals and Airbnb and the like were actually illegal. Only in Jan 2018 did the city actually come down and say, okay, yes, we're gonna make short-term rentals legal, but they also came up with a whole bunch of rules and regulations to go along with them. So what happened right after that is that a couple of individuals actually appealed the decision. They went to the, what is it called? The Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, the LPAT, to appeal that decision of the city. They still wanted to make it legal, of course, but they didn't want that many regulations and so many restrictions on Airbnbs in Toronto. And it took about 2 years worth of court dates and discovery and appeals, and I don't know that much legal language, but it took 2 years, and finally now we're in November 2019 and the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, LPAT, ruled just about 2 weeks ago approximately that that all the appeals have been dismissed and the original city regulations that came out in Jan 2018 are going to be upheld. Isn't that fun? 2 years worth of law costs for nothing. Okay, so city regulations are really confusing, but we're gonna go through the top 8 points on the new Airbnb and short-term regulations for the city of Toronto. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. Let's go. Number 1, short-term rentals are permitted across the city in all housing types. So that's not really a regulation, it's just one of the clarifications in their new, rules or act, or I don't know what they're doing at the city level, bylaw, I don't know. Anyway, so this is all found on the City of Toronto website. I will link it below so you can read it for yourself. But basically they're saying short-term rentals are permitted across the city in all housing types. The only thing you can't do is run an Airbnb out of a retail shop or a commercial shop or an office space, which should be, obvious, but for whatever reason it's not, so they've put that in there. Okay, so pretty much every single residential unit, so whether it's a basement apartment, a house, a condo, townhouse, whatever it is, if it's a residential unit, you're allowed to do Airbnb and short-term rentals. Number 2, people can host short-term rentals in their principal residence only. Okay, so this one's a little bit more meaty. We really have to delve into what principal residence actually means. Principal residence is basically the place where you live on a regular basis. So it's especially important for people that own more than one property, whether it's in the city of Toronto or it's not, that doesn't matter. Let's say you have like a condo in downtown where you live regularly for, majority of the year, and you also have a cottage up north. So obviously it's not in the city, but it doesn't matter. You do have a second property there. So the condo that you live in, majority of the time, that would be your principal residence. And that means that the Airbnb or any short-term rental that you do can only be in your condo, not in your cottage. That's weird, right? So if I'm spending the entire year, pretty much the entire year in downtown in my condo, as my principal residence, that's the one that I can Airbnb. Right? While my cottage is empty, except for the summer when I'm there, my cottage is empty all year, but I cannot Airbnb that because that's not my primary residence. Number 3, people can rent up to 3 bedrooms in a house or the entire residence. So basically they're saying that either you rent out your entire house, as is, everything, the whole unit, so whether it's a condo or a house or a townhouse or whatever, just the whole thing all together, you can rent it out. Or if you're just doing like room by room rentals, you can only rent out 3 bedrooms. basically, my interpretation of this is that what they're trying to prevent people from doing is running their properties like a halfway house or like a hotel where people are just checking in and checking out of rooms. So if you're renting on a room by room basis, you can rent 3 maximum. And if you have the, you still have the option to rent out the whole house, like altogether. But remember, this still has to be your principal residence. You can't have a condo, live in it, and then your cottage rented out by room or by entire residence. No, your primary residence, like you live there, you can rent it out room by room, like the extra rooms that you have. Or let's say you're on vacation for 2 months in Europe, next year hopefully, you're on vacation for 2 months in Europe, and then you can rent out your primary residence, the one that you're living in, then you can rent that out, the entire residence or 3 bedrooms. Also, I thought it might be interesting for you to know that there's a website called Inside Airbnb. They do a whole bunch of Airbnb statistics, and in Toronto, there's a breakdown of the different listing types. So we have the entire home or entire apartment listings, which make up 64% of all listings on Airbnb. Then we have private rooms in a shared space. So let's say I'm living in my condo, principal residence is the 3-bedroom condo because I'm so loaded. And I'm renting out my 2 extra bedrooms on Airbnb, I'm allowed to do that. So that sort of structure makes up 33.9, just 34% of all the listings in Toronto on Airbnb. And shared rooms, I don't really know what that would be. Like, here's our shared room and there's your bunk bed and here's my bed. Like, anyway, so shared rooms is 1.8%. But the majority of the listings are the entire home or the entire apartment. Now, a lot of these is people that bought that condo specifically to do Airbnb rentals in, but there's new legislation that's going to prevent them from doing that. Why? Because that's not their primary residence. So yes, you can still rent out the whole thing, but the whole thing has to be your primary residence. And if the whole thing is your primary residence, then you're living there. Then when are you going to do Airbnb? Exactly. Okay, what are we on? 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4. People who live in secondary suites can also participate as long as the secondary suite is their principal residence. Okay, so investors, I'm talking to you. You're not gonna like this one. Okay, so if you live in a house, let's say you live in a house, and you have a basement apartment that's rented out to tenants. Okay, so you have a house, you're living upstairs, the basement is rented out to tenants. The upstairs portion of that home, so the main floor and the upstairs floor where your family lives, that is your primary residence, not the entire property, okay? And the basement, because you've made a separate suite, it's a separate apartment, that secondary suite is considered the tenant's primary residence. That floor, the basement floor, is not part of your primary residence. So, the tenants in the basement, who you rented out to this nice young couple that's very professional and pays their rent on time and keeps everything clean, those tenants are actually the primary residents of your basement apartment. And because it's their primary residence, they can list that unit on Airbnb. And technically they wouldn't have to ask you. I know there's verbiage in most leases about subleasing and all of that, but basically this is sort of giving them the right to be able to rent out their own principal residence. I think sublet laws will still apply if it's been negotiated in your lease already, but what they're saying is that you as the owner of that property, but you're the occupant of the upstairs portion, not the downstairs portion, that is no longer your primary residence. It's a second unit, it's completely separate, and you cannot put that on Airbnb. In the case that you don't have any tenants in your basement, so let's say you own the house, your family is living upstairs, and the basement is a full, finished unit, a secondary unit, but there's no tenants there, so you just haven't have any tenants. Does that make that secondary suite part of your home? No, because it's still a separate suite. If it's considered a secondary suite, then it's considered to obviously not be a part of your principal residence. And if it's not a part of your principal residence, then you can't rent it out on Airbnb. Really weird, right? I also was thinking that Another question that comes up is what actually constitutes a secondary suite? So I don't know if you're familiar, but in the city of Brampton, the statistic, or no, is it a rumor or a statistic? I don't know. The rumor is that about 80% of basement apartments in Brampton are actually illegal. Okay, so I don't actually have information about this, but illegal means that they're not registered with the city. So I don't know if the stat is still 80% or if that's accurate or not, but a lot of basement apartments or secondary suites in Brampton and other places, I'm sure, are technically not legal. So if it's not a legal secondary suite, and it doesn't really have a legal, status as a secondary unit, then isn't it just a part of your home? And if it is a part of your home, but it's not legal, then it still counts as your primary residence. And if it's your primary residence, then technically you can still Airbnb it, right? So I don't know, that's going to be a little complicated to see how they're going to govern that, or how they're going to actually define secondary suite. Like if there's like a kitchen or a bathroom, then it's a secondary suite, or if it is registered with the city as a secondary suite, only then it's a secondary suite. So I don't know how they're going to do that, but you know what? We'll wait for more clarification from the government. Number 5. I really should have numbered these. Okay, 5. An entire home can be rented as a short-term rental if the owner or tenant is away, up to a maximum of 180 nights per year. So they already said that you're allowed to do room rentals, and they already said that you're allowed to rent out the entire house. Now, apparently, if you're renting out the entire home, you can't do it for more than 180 nights per year. So basically, maximum 6 months. And remember, this has to be your primary residence. So this time you're in Europe for 6 months, not 2. Let's say you're living in your condo, your nice condo in downtown Toronto, and that's your primary residence, and then you're spending 6 months in Europe. For those 6 months, you can rent out the entire residence. You cannot rent it out for 181 nights in the year. So that also is, it's interesting. But because it's for your primary residence only, how many people are there that permanently live in that house and call it their primary residence, and then are also coincidentally away for more than 6 months at a time? So I think that should be fine. Also, inside Airbnb, fun stat for you. The average number of nights that the average Toronto Airbnb listing is booked is 101 nights. So that falls way below 180. So I guess the majority of the people would be fine. Okay, number 6. People who rent their homes short-term must register with the city and pay $50. Of course the city wants to collect the fees, and you know what? That's fine. But I don't know if this is like a per owner charge or a per listing charge or a per property charge, or if it only lasts 1 year, or is it like every time you get a booking, or we don't know. So it just says that they have to register with the city and pay $50. I think it's a one-time fee, but I mean, I don't know. Number 7, almost there. Number 7, companies such as Airbnb must pay a one-time license application fee of $5,000 plus $1 for each night booked through the company. So basically, Airbnb, the company, the app that's allowing this or facilitating this, they're going to have to do a one-time license fee of $5,000, which I bet is like pennies for them. And then they're going to have to do an ongoing charge of $1 per night booked, which is probably something that I guess they're going to add on just to the listing price, and as like one of like the service charge, the cleaning charge, and the whatever City of Toronto charge, $1 per night. So Airbnb probably doesn't want to pay that out of pocket, and they're probably going to add it to the listing price. Now, the average price of a listing in Toronto is $140 per night. So I guess adding $1 more to that, making the price $141, I guess it's not that bad. But there is that, okay? And we have number 8. People doing short-term rentals must pay a 4% Municipal Accommodation Tax on all rentals that are less than 28 consecutive days. Companies such as Airbnb can enter into voluntary agreements to collect the MAT on behalf of those associated with their company. So, okay. I would have loved to find the average length of an Airbnb rental in Toronto, but I couldn't find that statistic. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be less than 28 consecutive days. I'm thinking maybe like 1 to 7 nights, because that's usually what tourists and business travelers and stuff are looking for. Now, the 4% MAT, Municipal Accommodation Tax, on an average listing price of $140 a night would mean that the guest or the host or the company, Airbnb, is paying an extra $5.60 per night. So if you're staying for a week, that's an extra $39 on your Airbnb bill. So it won't be the listing price, it'll be above and beyond that, because the MAT does not go to Airbnb and it does not go to the host. It goes straight to the city. So if they add that on, then that's going to be, a pretty big chunk. Your $140 a night listing is now going to be $180 a night if you're booking for a week. No, it's going to be $100. Your $140 listing per night is now going to be $146 a night. Now, either the owner can charge it for their listing and then they pay it to the city like altogether, or Airbnb will collect it like an extra charge. So like the cleaning charge, service fee, and then the MAT. Maybe they'll just collect it all on there. We don't really know. These regulations just came out, so I'm sure Airbnb and all the other short-term rental companies are going to figure out what it is that they want to do. But we'll have to see what they decide and which way it'll go. So those were my top 8 main takeaways for the new regulations for Airbnb in Toronto. I know it's a pretty heavy video. There's a lot of new regulations and there's still a lot of confusion about what's going on. But of course, we have to take everything into account and see how they're going to look to govern it. If you are an investor that's considering doing an Airbnb purchase, know that these new regulations and anything that happens in the future will affect you. So just let's sit down, let's talk about what are the best options for you. There are other ways to have secure investments that would not be affected by any of these regulations. There's a whole market of rentals and other types of investments in real estate that may make sense for you. So if you have any questions about this, please comment below. If you have any questions about any other sorts of real estate investment, definitely let me know. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please click the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll see you on the next video.